Fresh from victories at Forts Henry and Donelson, Union General Ulysses Grant landed his forces at Pittsburg Landing. His plan was simple: camp his men, wait for Major General Don Carlos Buell's Army of the Ohio, and launch a joint strike against Corinth, Mississippi, a vital railway hub that served as the only line linking the Atlantic coast to the Mississippi River. Grant felt secure. He was utterly convinced that Confederate General Albert Sidney Johnston would remain idle inside Corinth. He was wrong, as the Confederates secretly marched out to smash Grant's forces while they were divided. What followed was the Battle of Shiloh, the bloodiest conflict in American history up to that point. The Confederates outnumbered the Union on the first day. Grant's army at Pittsburg Landing numbered roughly 33,000 men across the divisions of Sherman, Prentiss, McClernand, Hurlbut, and W.H.L. Wallace. The attacking Confederate Army of the Mississippi numbered almost 45,000. With numerical superiority and the element of surprise, the Confederates were poised to destroy Grant's army. At Shiloh, Grant stumbled into a catastrophic security failure. The Union troops camped in a sprawling, unfortified mess. Many were Green volunteers who had never fired a shot in anger. When the Confederate hammer fell at dawn on April 6th, it caught some men cooking breakfast. Some units fled before they could even form battle lines. But what if the Union forces were led not by an Ohio West Pointer, but by the greatest general of the Byzantine Empire? What if Flavius Belisarius were in command at Shiloh? Welcome to a new series where we tear up the history books and drop history's greatest commanders into the crucible of the American Civil War. We will explore how the distinct temperaments, doctrines, and battle-tested experiences of ancient icons would reshape the war's most famous campaigns. To keep the simulation fair, we are assuming these legendary tacticians are fully versed in 19th-century weaponry, logistics, and technology. They know how to employ rifled muskets, understand the devastating power of Napoleonic artillery, and read a modern map. The Compulsive Fortifier. A Belisarius-commanded Union army would never have been caught in the open. Historically, the Union almost completely ignored scouting reports about Confederate presence, and left their camps totally open. Sherman, the only West Pointer among the active division commanders on the field, famously refused to believe a general attack was coming. He ignored reports of enemy movement, declaring that Confederate cavalry on Saturday was just a minor demonstration. He only realized the truth when his own orderly was shot dead next to him, and he took a bullet to his own hand. Belisarius would have stripped the Confederates of that tactical surprise on day one. At the Battle of Dara in 530 A.D., faced with a Persian army that vastly outnumbered him, Belisarius's very first move was to dig a massive system of trenches and fortifications. Entrenching compulsively, even when his own officers complained that it looked unaggressive, was his signature move. Furthermore, the historian Procopius notes that Belisarius ran incredibly tight discipline on outposts, repeatedly catching enemy movements early because he insisted on aggressive picketing. If Belisarius is at Pittsburg Landing, the Union army digs in the moment they step off the boats. They create a rigid outpost system and a deep picket screen far ahead of the camps. Belisarius' forward defenses would have detected the Confederates, as Grant's could have easily done. Historically, the Confederate approach march was a disaster. A journey meant for one day took 3 because the corps got tangled on the same narrow roads. By the night of April 5th, the Confederates bivouacked shockingly close to the Union camps, close enough that soldiers could hear enemy drums and bugles. Yet Sherman remained unconcerned. Only the rogue intuition of one Union colonel, Everett Peabody, led to a 3 a.m. patrol that bought Benjamin Prentiss's division a slim 2-hour warning. Because of Peabody's rogue patrol, the Union units met the assault in front of their camps rather than inside them. Under Belisarius, this forward scouting would be standing army doctrine, not one colonel's lucky paranoia. A Belisarius-style vedette screen of mounted scouts would have made contact with the tangled Confederate columns on the evening of April 5th. The element of surprise is completely erased. The tactical rhythm. When the Confederate assault hits on April 6th, the entire shape of the battle changes. Instead of catching disorganized men at breakfast, the Confederates slam directly into prepared, entrenched lines. Belisarius's grand strategy follows a strict, repeating rhythm. 1. Absorb the blow most of the morning. This will force the enemy to exhaust their energy and ammunition against a heavily fortified defensive line. 2. Identify overextension by around midday. Belisarius watches for the exact moment the enemy advance loses its formation, bunches up, or pauses. 3. Deliver the counterpunch by the afternoon. Belisarius launches an immediate, disciplined local counterattack using fresh reserves kept close to the front. The actual events of Day 1 would fit into Belisarius's strategy, especially since the Confederates had a slight numerical advantage. Historically, the Confederates lost critical time because hungry soldiers paused to loot abandoned Union camps and eat the Federals' uneaten breakfasts. This delay gave Sherman and John McClernand a brief window to reorganize. Later, the Confederate command structure broke down completely. Their three-corps system fractured into intermingled units controlled piecemeal by Hardee, Polk, Bragg, and Breckinridge. 14 out of 16 brigades converged into a brutal bottleneck at the Hornets' Nest, completely halting their advance while General Daniel Ruggles spent hours consolidating 62 artillery guns just to blast the pocket. Belisarius spent his career exploiting exactly this kind of enemy disorder. At Dara, his cavalry stood perfectly still until the Persian cataphracts overextended and lost formation. The moment the Confederate units become intermingled and halt to loot or bunch up against a strongpoint, Belisarius strikes. This is not a passive defense. It is a calculated series of sharp, local counterpunches the moment the attacker overextends or pauses. The decisive finish. Grant survived the first day by trading space for time. He fell back through 3 successive defensive lines, relying on the heavy siege guns at the landing and the Union gunboats Tyler and Lexington to anchor his final position at the river. He knew if he could just last until nightfall, Buell's reinforcements would arrive to turn the tide on Day 2. Belisarius would not need to wait for Buell. He was unusually skilled at managing political pressure to fight before he was ready, famously pushing back against Emperor Justinian's court to preserve his armies. While Grant felt intense pressure from his superior, Henry Halleck, to be aggressive, Belisarius would focus entirely on numbers and positioning. However, executing his classic strategy presents a massive historical obstacle. Belisarius has no cavalry. At Dara and Decimum, Belisarius relied on his elite, armored horse archers and heavy lancers to deliver his winning blows. But at Shiloh, organized Union cavalry is practically non-existent, amounting to less than 1% of the total force. In the muddy woods of Tennessee, his favorite tactical hammer is missing. How does a cavalry genius adapt? He does what he always did when resource-starved. He improvises. Instead of using horsemen as his flanking hammer, Belisarius would use his most reliable mobile force on foot. Grant left Major General Lew Wallace's division isolated several miles away at Crump's Landing. Belisarius's doctrine relied heavily on keeping a dedicated, disciplined strike force in hand for the decisive moment. Rather than letting Wallace get lost on muddy backroads, Belisarius would have recalled his 7,500 veterans early on April 6, holding them close as a designated reserve. By mid-afternoon, the Confederate attack under P.G.T. Beauregard, who took over after Albert Sidney Johnston bled to death in a ravine, would be spent, low on ammunition, and structurally fractured. While a confident Beauregard historically sent a telegram to Richmond claiming a complete and glorious victory, Belisarius would unleash Lew Wallace's fresh infantry division to smash the disorganized and exposed Confederate flanks. On Day 2, Grant launched a dawn counterattack to reclaim the field but failed to pursue the retreating enemy. The actual pursuit was anemic because Grant's army lacked large, organized cavalry units. The token effort ran straight into Nathan Bedford Forrest's rearguard at Fallen Timbers and stopped cold, very nearly costing Sherman his life. Belisarius's historical record of pursuit is mixed, but it was always calculated. At Dara, he held back his cavalry because a pursuit into unknown terrain was too risky. But in other Persian campaigns, he maintained relentless pressure on retreating forces, denying them a chance to reorganize. The defining factor for Belisarius was always whether he had the right tool for the job. Knowing he lacks the cavalry to execute a safe, disciplined pursuit, Belisarius would choose deliberate, calculated restraint on Day 2 rather than a half-hearted infantry chase. He would secure Pittsburg Landing and consolidate his forces. The verdict. Putting Belisarius in Grant's boots turns a near catastrophe into a textbook defensive victory. By replacing Grant's early complacency with obsessive fortification and active scouting, The bloodiest morning of the Civil War becomes a crushing one-day defeat for the Confederacy. The Union Army wouldn't even need Buell's overnight reinforcements to turn the tide, because the tide would never have turned against them in the first place. Thank you for watching. Do you think Belisarius could have prevented the Confederate surprise attack in the morning, and then launched his own counterattack in the afternoon? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Thank you.